أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue with our explanation of the short surahs of the Quran. We recap first of all with Al Asr, the surah we completed in the previous session. So this particular surah is one of the shortest in the Quran, very, very profound in terms of its depth. And what it essentially tries to do is it aims to rewire our thinking about what loss is and what success is. Now we, as human beings, we've got notions of what success are. We think it's to do with goodnesses in life, which is to do with your prestige, your power, your knowledge, your education, and what you own, also in terms of a house or car or how much money you've got in the bank, etc. So while that is our sort of worldly views of what success is, Allah talks about something else. He says, "Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr." Now he talks about the fact that with time, man is actually at a loss, right? And the definition of loss is something different because it explains it in the next two verses. That is, those who are not in loss are except those who, first of all, have iman, amanu, then wa amilus salihat, and they do good deeds or righteous deeds, wa tawasaw bil haqq, and they encourage one another or enjoin one another with what is truth or what is the correctness of things, and watawasaw bis sabr, and they encourage each other with patience or perseverance. So if you look at this, Allah is saying that as time passes us by, humankind, that is all human beings, will go through this phase where we are actually going to be in a state of loss, except for those of us who display four qualities that will guarantee our success, not only in this world, but also in the next. And the four qualities are: the person has iman or faith, does good deeds, proclaims the truth and stands by it no matter what, and exercises patience, as he will be tested and will need the perseverance to see through the challenges of life. So the image of a declining day suggests the stage in the day or in life when only a short while or time is left for those wishing to make up for lost time or to reform their ways or to lead a different lifestyle. And when we do study the history of past peoples, we see lots of evidence of those who failed and those who succeeded. History is also replete with the lives of failures, like if you look at it in the Quran specifically, failures like Pharaoh, Qarun, and Abu Lahab. And on the other side, we have the successes, like all the prophet stories in the Quran, where they had various hardships and how they overcame their hardships and their challenges. Now, just two or three aspects that I might not have said in the last round, and that is, these four conditions have to be met together. If you look at it, it says all humankind are at a loss. And then it starts off, except those who have faith or have firm faith and belief in iman. Then there's a were. And if you notice the next three lines, all have a were and a were and a were again, which means that it's not only enough to have faith of your own, which is a very personal thing, and your faith is developed by means of salah and dhikr and all the other ibadat, as well as the fact that you believe not only in the oneness of Allah, but you even believe in two other important things, which is risalah, that is the Prophet's messagehood, as well as all the other prophets. And a very important third component is the day of judgment or the day of accountability, that Yawmuddin, that is mentioned or so often so far that we've come across. So there's three components to this. The first component is something very, very personal, where each individual has to account for his own iman and his own faith and polish his faith up and make it to an extent that it is presentable to Allah in His court. So that's the first component. Then the other parts, if you look at it, has to do with community activism. So in other words, it's not only selfishly trying to secure your own salvation as an individual, but Allah is saying here that you must do three other things. If you look at وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, now normally in the Arabic sentence, we would have got a situation or a grammar sort of sentence, وَيَعْمَلُوا الْأَعْمَالَ الصَّالِحَةٌ or as-salihah, which is you will do deeds, a'mal are deeds, and then as-salihah with the ta marbuta singular, meaning many, many, many good deeds. Right? So that would be the normal phrase that we'll expect. But in this surah it says wa'amilu, and they do or they did, past tense, and this is like a continuous thing. As-salihat, which is it's a plural form, but it's a plural for some, for the few rather, not some. So what that difference is that you don't have to do many, many, many good deeds. All Allah is asking us to do is a few good deeds. And that is this word as-salihat, the way it's listed here. So in actual fact, it's not like a very, very tall order. You need to do very, very basically whatever is some good deeds that you are capable of doing. You have the strength to do, and to do it often, and to persevere with it. So that's the first thing, that you must have the iman, you must do these few good deeds, and then it carries on. Now obviously good deeds is you doing it not only for yourself and for your own scales of good deeds as it were, but you have to do these deeds to other people. So it's your community around you. So it could be your immediate family, your neighbors, the society you live in. So it's all humanity. In other words, you must do righteous or good deeds that benefits and be of benefit to humanity at large. Then it goes on, وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. Now this verb tawasi, when you have a ta in front and alif in the middle and another letter at the end, this idea of tawasi is the verb, means you're doing it in conjunction with others. In other words, it's you plus others that jointly do this. And we even mentioned the previous time that tawasi is also from wasiya. Wasiya means an inheritance. So something that, say if you were at the end of your lifespan and you want to call your children or call all the people that you want to give your last sort of words of advice to, or even give your last bit of wealth to, you will then do what is called the wasiya, that final sort of, in a very gentle way, explain to people where things are kept so that they don't have a difficulty when you are gone and when you are passed on. Also the fact that whatever wealth you want to give out, you explain what it is. You obviously must write a will, which is very, very important, that we leave a written will as well, so that there's no conflict and argument after we have departed. So what we need to do is, this has to be done with people. So as much as you want to give advice to others, the flip side is also important, which is you must be able to accept advice from others to you as well. So you mustn't be like that high and mighty, all pious, self-righteous kind of individual, thinking that you know it all and only you have the right way and it's only you that have to give your advice to others. There are times in life when it's the reverse is also applicable, which is when others tell you good advices, you must also heed to it and take it. So this haqq works both ways, where you can stand up for haqq in the rights of others, and if others are talking about you and wanting to get you on the right path because you have gone astray, then you must also have the courage and the conviction to say, yes, I'm at fault and you need to advise me as well. Likewise with tawasaw bis sabr, and you must encourage each other with patience and perseverance whenever that is necessary. Because in life, it won't go very, very smooth all the time. You will have challenges, and I mean, if you look at every prophet's life, every prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of them, they had to go through very, very many trials and challenges, and they needed the sabr and this perseverance in order to succeed with their missions. I think I want to mention one incident in the life of Hazrat Umar ibn al-Khattab. He once went to a person's house. He was walking by and he looked through the window and it appeared to him as if this person was drunk. So he kind of barged in and said, he tried to correct the person. Now, the person on the other hand, he said, well, you know what, I might have committed one sin, but you, by barging into my house unannounced without knocking on the door and peering through the window, you've actually committed three sins. So Hazrat Umar self-reflected at that point, and he actually apologized, and he agreed actually with the man that he shouldn't have done what he did, and they left it at that. Then after a few days of this event, one day on the mimbar when Hazrat Umar was giving his khutbah, he then had the occasion to see the same gentleman sitting at the back, and he came here, and after the congregation had departed, the two of them met once more, and Hazrat Umar again apologized, and the man said, you know what, by virtue of what that conversation we had, as a result of it, I actually gave up drinking as well. So, in other words, you were right in that I was a bit, intoxicated on that day. So it's correct what you were advising me, and I advised you, and you took my advice, and therefore I now changed also my ways. So you can see how this tawasi works. The tawasi is a two-way thing, where you do something good for somebody else, and they sometimes have to do it to you as well if you are not on the straight and narrow as you should be. So what we get from the surah is basically the fact that, this surah is very, very deep. It's not about yourself only and your own salvation. It's about service to humanity at large, looking after the needs of others, doing every little small good deed, and sometimes even just a smile on an occasion is actually a good deed. And you don't have to be really wealthy to actually incur that particular reward. There was even one occasion, maybe this is another incident that maybe extrapolates this example very clearly. It says one day a Sahabi came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, you know what, I'm a poor man and I don't have the wealth to actually be able to give out the sadaqah that other people are able to give out. So please make a dua that I become wealthier than what I am. And the Prophet ﷺ made this dua for him. And lo and behold, after a few days and weeks and months, this person became wealthy to the point that he was a farmer and he had a few sheep, and those sheep multiplied. And now he found it a situation where his little farm that he had was not big enough, which was near the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ, Majid al-Nabi. So he had to move to the outskirts of Medina. And when he moved there, then he found it a bit hard to come to the salah and jama'ah in the Prophet's mosque, to such an extent that his wealth, amassed to such a point that when the zakat collectors then went to knock on his door to say, you know what, you have to pay your zakat on this wealth, he found it very hard to even give zakah, which is an obligatory duty on all Muslims that have the minimum requirements. Now look at how this Sahabi's life changed, where sometimes with wealth, he forgot the fact that he has to read his salah on time and in jama'ah. He found it a burden to actually go to the mosque. And secondly, even when it came to zakah, he found it now, even though he had much wealth, he couldn't actually give even zakah. Now look at where he came from. Initially he didn't have enough money to even give sadaqah, and now when he had enough money to even give zakah, he found zakat very hard to give. So the moral of this particular story is that, when you have wealth, appreciate whatever amount you have, whether it's little or a lot. But in either case, you need to do what you have to do with it. So if you are totally impoverished and you don't have wealth, the Prophet ﷺ has advised us that even if you have to just smile to your friend or neighbor or fellow brother, whoever, that in itself is an act of charity and you will be given a reward for it. So if you look at this وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, it's doing even that little acts of charity, which is even sometimes a smile. If you can afford, you give according to your wealth, how much you can. In that way, the whole of society will benefit from you being the individual that was given one ni'mah or one na'im of being wealthy. We also recall that Imam Shafi said that if only this surah was revealed and not the entire Quran, we have sufficient as the ummah for our own salvation and success. So this is a very, very profound surah. Please try and read it like with the kind of decorum that it deserves. Try and shed a tear as well whenever you're reading it in salah, because this is something that's a recipe for our success in this world and in the next. Have iman, do a few good deeds, and encourage each other with truth and patience. Okay, we then move on to the last surah of this of the series of the 23 short surahs. This is Al Humaza, the Scandal Manga. It's 9 verses revealed in Makkah. So this surah opens with a threat of impending affliction and grief to basically 3 categories of people. The one is the scandal monger or the slanderous reviler, right? And the one who in greediness of wealth and acclaim defames others. So it's essentially 3 groups of people that are mentioned in this particular surah, and we'll unpack that just now. So the surah condemns the greedy backbiter and also gives another unique description of what hellfire is and the one that's reserved for this category of people. So other names for this word, for the surah, instead of Humaza, it's also translated as sometimes the gossip monger or the slanderer or the slanderous reviler. So if you go to the actual surah itself, it starts off with a very, very powerful word which is wail. Now, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wailul likulli humazatil lumazah alladhi jama'a malahu wa addada yahsabu anna malahu akhlada كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في أمد ممددة. So the 3 groups of people mentioned here is that first word humaza. Now in another place in the Quran they talk of hammaz and lammaz. Now hammaz is the person that backbites a lot, who talks ill about other people behind their backs. So that's the humaza part of it. And the lumaza is a different category of people where sometimes you come out in the open with your slander. In other words, you say it openly that I accuse so-and-so of having done so-and-so. So there's 2 kinds of people here. The ones that do it almost like secretively behind people's backs and quietly. And this one has been, there's many hadith that talk about the fact that somebody who does backbiting is almost akin to the person eating the flesh of his dead brother. Now, this is very, very serious, because if you look at, it's a very easy thing to do, first of all. I mean, for you to open your mouth and to talk bad about people, whether it's true or not true, that's not the issue. The fact of the matter is that you are speaking ill or something behind somebody's back is the issue. Now, it can be that sometimes you're saying even the truth about the person, in which case it doesn't become a backbiting, where if you're saying something that's good about a person, that's fine. But the moment it borders on the evil side of things, then that becomes a problem. So the humaza is the backbiting part, and the lumaza is, like I said, where you openly slander somebody. Now, just to talk about that, I had a good lecture the other night where the Imam was mentioning the fact that sometimes, when you look at a mirror, if you've got a mirror in front of you and you're looking at your face, you can for yourself look at what you look like in that mirror. It might be that you've got a bit of a wart or a mole or hair, extensive growth of hair, or maybe less hair that's growing on some parts of your body. You're going half bald or you're full bald, whatever your condition is, you can see yourself for what you are in that particular mirror. Now, the idea of looking at yourself in a mirror is not where you do it like sort of, for a matter of pride, or you stand in front and you rave about yourself and say how good you are. The idea is that you're looking at yourself for like the issue of muhasaba or self-reflection, where you must look at yourself sincerely and say, you know what, am I am I the person that I'm projecting myself to be, the way I'm looking at myself in the mirror? And in other words, what people see of me, am I really that individual that I claim to be? So that's the one conception we need to get from the muhasabah part, where we reflect on what we want others to see of ourselves. Then there's the other notion that when you step aside, take one step away from the mirror and you say you're looking at the wall now, that image of yours doesn't stay in the mirror. It's gone. Now it's a case of, life carries on, as it were, and people will view you the way, whatever they see you to be. And there has to be like a similarity between who you really are and that image you project of yourself. So there has to be like a synthesis between those two views, so that what you are both outwardly and what you claim to be inwardly must be a synthesis of sorts for yourself. Right? And also, in terms of hiding of faults, you'll find that very often what we try and do, especially when we're in the public eye, is we try and sometimes we use makeup or we use other means to hide what we really are, and people mustn't see the sort of the worst side or the bad side of us. Now, if that is the case, then ideally we should work towards even getting rid of even those sort of bad sort of sides to our dimension or our personalities, and that's something that's also a good thing to do. And finally, it's a case of, again, what you see and what you want to project yourself to be and who you really are is, there has to be, that it's one individual. It mustn't be like you are like kind of portrayed in a hypocritical way where you appear to be good, but people closest to you know how evil you are, or that they know the other side of you. And if that has to come out in the open, you will actually be embarrassed. So we need to work at that sort of conception of ourselves, that what we project ourselves to be on the outside must be also reflecting on the inside. So I think it's an important image about the mirror that we need to keep in mind when we look at Humaza. Now, Humaza is likewise also another evil dimension to people, in that sometimes people accuse each other, and they do it very, very publicly. I mean, we had an incident in the life of the Prophet ﷺ where people accused Hazrat Aisha, the noble wife, the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen of the Prophet ﷺ, as well as the daughter of Abu Bakr, of a slanderous event in her life. And it was only after a few days or weeks that that particular revelation came to rectify this misbelief and the kind of notions that some people were spreading in society from the hypocrites and other people that were sort of having a bone to pick with the Prophet and Hazrat Abu Bakr. So this has happened in the time of the Prophet. It happens up to today as well, where people go out there and they slander people maliciously, aiming at them, and they use all kinds of ways and means. Today they use PR and marketing agencies to make sure that their image remains intact and pristine, and other people's, if it gets messed up, it's fine. So this is two groups of people. It can be the same individual, or it can be two different people, where one person does the backbiting and then the Humaza is the person that does the slandering. So it could be the same person, or it could be two different people. Then the next verse, Alladhi jama'a malahu wa'addada. Now this is a reference to people who have this jama'a, this gathering of mal or wealth, to such an extent that they wa'addadahu. Addada is to count it over and over again. In other words, they take sort of almost pride, and they feel happy that they can count their wealth and check the stock exchange often and check their bank balances and how the shares are doing, and they get so engrossed in this jama'ah or gathering of wealth and counting it over and over again. So it's a very selfish kind of a person that deals with, amassing wealth, but keeping it to himself, it's only for selfish needs, making sure that his future is like guaranteed and he'll have a good life going forward. Then it carries on with the same person. It says, يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَ. Yahsaba means he makes like an accounting, or he thinks of it as if his wealth, malahu akhlada, will make him a Khalid. A Khalid is somebody who lives forever. One of the qualities of Allah is immortal. He's timeless. So he thinks that this wealth is going to continue with him, not only in this world, but probably in the hereafter as well. He's got that notion that because he's been doing so well in this world, Allah likes him, that He's given him so much of wealth, not knowing that actually Allah is testing him with this wealth. But he thinks of it as if this wealth is going to be sufficient for me in this world and perhaps in the hereafter, and I'll be sort of well off and I don't have anything to worry about. So that's verse 3. Now Allah sort of negates these things. He says, no, indeed, kalla, right? A very, very definite negative, yes. Layumbadhanna, he will be cast. Right? That la is an emphatic part of it, and then the noon with the tashdid at the end is a double emphasis. So it's a triple way of emphasizing that no. You going to be cast. This kind of person is going to be cast in what? And it's called al-Hotama. Now the Hotama is translated as something that crushes something else. Like if you think of a stone crusher, or something that can crush, other mineral resources of a very big size, and something that crushes or pulverizes the thing to powder or to its liquid state or whatever the case is. So this person that does scandal mongering, backbiting, as well as amassing of the wealth, and thinks he's going to live forever with it, what's going to happen to him is that he's going to be cast into a crusher, the crusher of crushers. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةُ. Again, if it's an alien word, the question is asked, what do you think, or what will show you what this crusher is? Then Allah goes ahead and describes what the crusher is. He says, Narullahil muqada. Now, previously we had Nasrullah, where I explained the fact that the help of Allah is very unique help. Now here in this context, we're having Narullah, means the fire of Allah. So it's not an ordinary fire that's just been made or brought into existence. This is a fire made specially by Allah for this category of people. And al-muqada means, it's set ablaze. In other words, it's fuming and raging fiercely. Right? So it's a fire that's raging intensively. Allati tattali'u ala al-afida, which ittala means to rise or to lift up. And fu'ad is the heart and afida is the hearts. So this fire, this crusher is going to have this component of it, is flames, that's going to rise to such an extent that it will envelop the heart. So, it will basically, you'll feel the heat of the fire as well. You'll be able to breathe the thing as well. You'll be able to, sense it. The smoke also of it will affect your lungs. So everything is going to affect you of this particular fire that's raging. Innaha alayhim mu'sada. Surely these flames, or this crusher's activity, is going to close in on you or upon them. Innaha alayhim mu'sada. Right? Fi amadim mumaddada. In amad or umud is a column. Mumaddada means outstretched. Now if you look at this whole thing, it's an image of like a cauldron or a container, large container. Think of it as a tall building, for instance, right? The tallest building we can think of, made of fire, where all the walls around it are these columns, but they are burning intensively or intensely. So the heat is being generated from all the sides of this particular building, and you are in the middle, and you happen to be right at the bottom of this particular building, where sometimes you can even see doors on the top, but it's of no use because you can't get out, because you are you are consumed by this raging fire. And this is the crusher that's going to be sort of enveloping you to the point where it's going to come onto your heart and your soul, and put that, also make it deformed, just the way you were, like through gossiping and backbiting, you were character assassinating and making people think, or making people humiliated in public. You are going to be crushed, and you are going to be made malformed or deformed in the process of this fire crushing you from all sides. So it's very, very serious surah as well. It starts off with Wailul Likulli, which shows Allah's anger and very, harsh language being used on this group of people. Now, if you look at these 3 or 4 surahs we've just covered, which is At-Takathur, where people go and amass wealth, and they're going to be, accountable and, on the Day of Judgment. Al-Asr is to do with the one we just did about the time and the fact that man is at a loss except those who have those 4 qualities or 4 characteristics. And Humaza in this particular one is also linked. So this is about man's attitude to others and to wealth. And it's the last of 3 surahs dealing with the Akhirah, which talks about a Hotama and something that's going to happen. So people are distracted, time is running out, and here we're talking of an incomparable fire made by Allah, this Narullah, specifically on this particular occasion for this particular group of people. Now let's look at individual lines. They say wail is used a total of 27 times in the Quran. In one other surah it is used at least 10 times in one surah alone. And 2 surahs begin with it, which is this Wailul Likulli Humaza, and the other one Wailul Lil Mutaffifin, that is about those who, when they weigh and measure, they expect full weight from others, but whereas when they have to sell, they try and jig the system or jig the scales and make them get less than what is their true value. So in all these surahs, the wail is used where it shows it's very, very serious, and the translation of it can be also that all kinds of permanent destruction be on. So it's very, very serious, as you can see from that language used. Right? So Allah curses people. Then it goes on to likulli, so it's to every one or each, right? Of either a humaza, a lumaza, or in the next verse, alladhi jama'a ma'lahu wa addada. So these are the 3 qualities of people that are going to be having destruction based on them. And if you look at the other thing, this humaza and lumaza is also 4 letters. And if you look at hotama, if I just go back, this word hotama. So if you look at these words, ha, ta, mim, and ata marbuta, here it's ha, mim, za, and ata marbuta, here it's la, mim, za, and ata marbuta. So this humaza, lumaza, and hotama are all on the same scale, as it were. They rhyme with each other. And so what's specific about these 2 people, Humaza and Lumaza, are they going to be given a similar thing called Hotama? Right? And the Ta Marbuta on the end makes it like continuous and makes it stronger. Like Alam is a knowledgeable person, and Allama means a very knowledgeable person. So likewise, Humaza is a very, very much somebody who indulges in backbiting to a great extent, and likewise Lumaza on a great extent to slander as well. So Humaza is the type of person who backbites. He talks badly about persons in their absence, and behind their backs he pokes fun at them. It's almost like taking a sharp object, like a little stick or something that's got a pokey end, and poking someone with a sharp object. That is equivalent of what the Humaza does. Then the Lumaza is the one who insults in somebody's face, is a slanderer. And essentially these are people who are overly concerned about others. They make gossip into a habit. Their mind is filled with petty issues. And sometimes they even project their evil. They don't want their own evil to show up. So what they do is they hide their own flaws by trying to pick on others' weaknesses. And in the process, they break someone else's self-worth. It also borders on cursing on someone or laughing at them, where you take pride in finding faults or finding flaw at others and pointing it out. So any condescending manner of address or harsh body language or vulgar words used to others is in this category of Humaza and Lumaza. Now, alladhi is a second group of persons that also deserve this. Verse 2 says, one who gathers wealth, who's quite rich but is not charitable. He tends to concentrate on others' flaws, and he projects onto others to cover his own, misdeeds or wrong things that he's done in life. So addada means to count over and over again, always counting money, making elaborate plans for his future. It takes a long time to make this money, and money becomes his entire life pursuit. He derives joy in doing so and wants it to multiply. So all his investments must multiply, and the stock exchange also must do well for him. And obviously he's not the type that shares his wealth. He keeps it to himself, and he's not really charitable. So basically, he can turn out to be a corrupt person, amassing wealth, thinks of it to be his salvation. So mal is your wealth. Now, if you look at even the wealthiest person we can think of in this world, what is compared to that person's own earnings or wealth is nothing, is minuscule in comparison to the bigger scheme of things. In other words, if you look at Allah's treasures in this world, all the things that He owns, I mean, just look at the earth and all the resources that it contains. I mean, He's the most ghani, the most wealthy, and His wealth will, it's not even that He needs this wealth. He's just made the earth a place where we can actually extract that wealth and extract that riches done through good ways and better persons' lives or communities' lives or even the country's lives. Right? So we shouldn't take pride in the fact that we've got the wealth, because mal essentially is here today with us and gone tomorrow when we go into our graves. Now, on a broader scale, this idea of earning wealth and counting it over and owning these big financial institutions like, for instance, the World Bank and the World Trade Organization and all these large corporations, look at how they use and abuse the rest of the world in the process of them acquiring this wealth. So some of these companies would use child labor. They would try to get this particular job done in the cheapest country possible in the world. They enlist sometimes the support of the mafia to protect their interests. Now, if you look at the Amazon rainforest, I mean, this happens there, even in the drug cartels. They utilize people like the mafia to ensure that their wealth is preserved and protected, immaterial of who suffers as a result of it. They also have this tendency to buy out politicians, to silence opposition, to make sure that politicians are on their side. They also avoid their own negative publicity, but they make sure when others do wrong, they want to broadcast what others have done, but they keep their own sort of bad dealings under wraps. They pay marketing companies huge monies to secure their brand, even if it's at the point of tarnishing the image of other brands and other rivals to them. Then we have even some world leaders who build their whole empire on credit, and they don't care about the future. So they live on the credit now, and they leave it to the grandchildren to sort out after they die. So they're very, very selfish in the sense that they're just looking at their own self-interest and self-image. And they think that the future generations will deal with the debt of the interest that they have incurred today. And if you look at today also, sometimes with the vaccine rollout as well, where countries are going into debt to buy some of these vaccines, and they raising loans which some countries will never be able to repay, and some, even if they can pay, they'll be paying multifold times more as a result of the interest that will be incurred. And this is a debt that the entire countries are going into just to secure vaccines. Then in terms of, sometimes with even in our Muslim community, we have sometimes reformers that sometimes make fun of people wearing a hijab or wearing a beard. Now, these are also things that we shouldn't take lightly, and it's not a light statement. And when Aisha radiallahu anha, when she heard about the revelation related to hijab, she tore her apron and covered her head immediately. So she implemented the hijab ruling immediately when it was revealed to the Prophet. So don't make fun of things like the hijab or the turban or the beard, because sometimes other people, out of love for the faith, they actually do it out of genuine love for the Prophet ﷺ. So essentially this surah is about verse 1, about attitude against others, the Humaza al-Humaza, the attitude of selfishness, about people having wealth and counting it over, and then the psychological, the fact that you think you get the kick you get out of having a lot of wealth is that you psychologically analyze yourself and think, hey, I'm doing well and I'm okay, and subtly also you think I'm going to live forever, and the day I fall sick, I'll be able to afford the best medical care, and the day I need a kidney, I'll just be able to buy one. But with all that, your life will still come to that. Without doubt, the end, the death will still take you, no matter how wealthy a life you led. So this notion of your wealth going to last for perpetuity has to sort of come up to an end. Likewise, we have sometimes people build monuments to be known forever, even after they die. Sometimes some people build the tallest building, and then it reaches a Guinness Book of Records, and they feel proud about it. Or sometimes they give large endowments to maybe a university and create a department and carry on their name for perpetuity, or build a hospital and have their name put on that particular building. Now, even that, while sometimes it's good to do sort of work of deeds where you give, where you don't expect somebody to acknowledge you in any way whatsoever, and sometimes it's good to give charity where in a sense you encourage others also to give charity by you giving it out in a known kind of way. But ideally, the best of charities is the one you do silently with no recognition for it, knowing full well that your reward is actually with Allah and Allah alone. Now, there was this one enemy of Islam, Walid ibn Mughira. He used to have a habit of pointing out the flaws of others. When he was asked to comment on the Quran, he frowned, he looked away, he showed arrogance, he says it was magic, and he came back to the Quraysh and towed that line to say to the people, don't believe in the Quran because it's magic and it's words of a poet. So we have people like that even in our midst who will undermine the goodness that you're trying to do. Also, we have poets and comedians today who use this kind of approach where they use words in a way that flatters one community or one society or one group of people or one racial group or one, tribal group or whatever, but they condescend and they belittle another sector of the society. So they refer to the flaws of others, and they do it sometimes openly or sometimes even secretly. And people, sometimes even comedians, they make it a point of laughter. I mean, people actually laugh at the fact that somebody is, seen in a bad light. Now, we should avoid this kind of thing or this approach in terms of the way we deal with people. Have respect for all. Then we move on. There are two temptations in this world. One is the dunya, or the wealth, or the mal, as well as children. And how many you have, and how good your family is, and how the status they have in society. Now, when you have these two things, where it's wealth and children and a good family name and the honor that goes with a good family name, sometimes it gets you into a false notion of a false world. Right? And sometimes we take it further, where we say that because Allah loves me so much in this world, actually I should be fine because I was like a chosen person and I can do as I please. And that notion gives you a false sense of superiority as well, where you can talk to people in a condescending way because you think you control everybody and you can call the shots. When you look around, sometimes some of the mutawallis in some mosques carry on like this, where because they might be big donors for the particular mosque or an institution, they then feel that because they sit on the board, they can then deal with people the way they like. I remember one example a few years ago where, and the Imam actually spoke out against it. He says, there's one mutawalli that when he comes to enter the mosque, he takes off his socks there, and then he expects the poor muazzin to go and fetch his socks for him, and even to put his shoes on a rack. Now, what kind of persons are these where when you have wealth, you think you're a big shot and you have to control, So it's all about this idea of what wealth should do to you, giving you a sense of the fact that wealth is there to test you. And if you take it to this extreme, remember one day is one day, and you will be accountable for it. All right, so we talked about the kalla and the la and the yumbazanna, the la in front and the noon or the tajdeed. There's a triple emphasis about the fact that that person is going to see the Hotama, the crusher. It's going to crush bones, it's going to reach the heart. Just like how you ate the flesh of others, this Hotama is waiting for you, will consume your skin and flesh and break or bend you out of shape. So literally this crusher is going to change the way you looked, and whatever you did to others on that day is going to be done to you. Now, so while you are guilty of two crimes, one severe punishment awaits you, and you have no idea what the crusher is or what will be your due as a result of your actions. Right. And what will the explanation of the crusher is? The fire of Allah, very, very strong term. And don't compare it to any other fire. Al-Muqada, which is something that's lit already, and Allah has set it alight specifically for this person. Once it's lit, it envelopes you and is magnified tremendously by putting it in a noun form rather than the verb. So it's an endless fire set up specifically to get the retribution for all this action of backbiting and slandering. Alright, so Isad, the word mu'sada comes from the root Isad. Isad is a barn where you keep animals, where you lock them up in others as a cage, and these animals cannot escape. Or sometimes Isad is also looked upon as like a big pot, or one of those big digs or something very big like that, where you use it to cook in it, and you put on the lid on top of it so that every time the steam tries to get out of it, the lid is put back so that the steam as well as the heat of that particular container is kept inside, and it gets more and more. So Musada is that type of, a cauldron or the building or the container that keeps the heat and whatever is boiling inside, keeps it inside all the time. Amad and Umud is to do with columns outstretched. So these columns can be like that. If you look at that image of a building, the burning metal, which gives in itself extra heat when metal is burnt, and this heat is all kept inside to burn even at a higher sort of pitch, at a higher amount. Now, Whale also ends off with this description of the columns of fire that burn and crush, and it's an added means of pain. And this happens to be the final warning of hellfire in the Quran as well for all persons. Now, this is a general warning. So if you do the backbiting, the slandering, and you amass the wealth and you keep it to yourself and you count it over and over and think of it as if it's your salvation and you're going to live forever, then be warned that there's a Hotama awaiting this group of people, and obviously you're going to meet your similar end. As much as you try to deform and crush other people, this Hotama is going to do that to you as well. Okay, so I think I've reached the end of the short surahs of the Quran. What's left now in the next last episode will be a summary of the 23 short surahs that we've covered in this particular series. I hope you've all benefited, or that we can all practice what we have learned, and every time we read salah, we read it slowly and ponder over the meaning of all these verses. And remember, the Quran wasn't revealed to the Arabs of Arabia. It was revealed to me and you, and it's a timeless book. It's there out there that we need to practice what we have learned and change our lives, and inshallah earn our salvation through the process. So let's end off with al-asr again. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal-asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr.